Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Evacuation flights continue out of Afghanistan as the August 31st deadline date of U.S. troop withdrawal looms. There could be a new federal tax coming for homeowners. Franco Terrazzano with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has the details. And there's a shortage of workers in Lethbridge. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf explains how our economy is doing better than other regions of the province.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Evacuation flights continued in Afghanistan with new urgency today, a day after two suicide bombings by the Islamic State targeted thousands of people desperately fleeing a Taliban takeover. Many Afghans made their way to the airport hoping to catch the next flight out. U.S. and Afghan officials now say that Thursday's bombings near the airport killed at least 95 Afghans and 13 U.S. military personnel. The Taliban have wrestled back control of the war-torn country 2 decades after they were ousted in a U.S.-led invasion. The reports that $28 million has been raised to help rescue Afghan Christians. According to American National Radio Show host Glenn Beck, the Nazarene Fund has been quite busy loading Afghan refugees this week. Beck says thanks to the donations, 20 757s are lined up and ready to go. He says by the end of the day today, they're hoping to move 7,000 Christians out of Afghanistan. The Pentagon says it has determined that the attack at the Kabul airport on Thursday involved only one location and not two, as was previously reported.
We do not believe that there was a second explosion at or near the Barron Hotel, that it was one suicide bomber. There are more than 5,000 U.S. service members in harm's way, saving as many people as they can. It's a noble mission. We have seen firsthand how dangerous that mission is, but ISIS will not deter us from accomplishing this mission.
According to an announced declaration by the Taliban, Afghanistan will now follow a strict version of Sharia law in which Christian converts would be considered apostates, a crime which is punishable by death. Shoaib Abadi is a pastor and an Afghan Canadian. He fled Afghanistan many years ago as a child escaping persecution. Pastor Abadi is also the executive director of Square One World Media in Winnipeg. He recently chatted with Greg Musselman from Voice of the Martyrs about the tragic events unfolding for the people of Afghanistan.
Shoaib, you have friends and family in Afghanistan. How have you been feeling about what's been going on there? I mean, it's heartbreaking when we see the images.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking with a heavy heart. I talk with my sister and nieces and one nephew. I have a sister with she has children and grandchildren in Afghanistan. And also we talk with believers, and yeah, it is heartbreaking. It is a heavy heart, and yeah, they are fearful, and they don't know what is going on. And sometimes when people ask me what is the reason it's all happened, my quick answer usually is, if the president of the United States doesn't know why it happened, then how I should know.
Yeah. Now, closer to home, the Lethbridge Military Museum recently reopened for viewings. As Micah Quinn explains, the museum features stories from Lethbridge soldiers who fought in many battles over the years to help secure our freedom.
The Lethbridge Military Museum promotes the military history of Lethbridge and the surrounding area, starting from the Boer War through to World War I and II, the Korean War, and up to the present time. Once you walk into the museum, you'll see the beautiful mural of remembrance.
And it consists of 63 images, which in themselves tell 63 stories.
The museum is run by volunteers like Ray ROMSES and Glenn Miller. ROMSES says one of his favorite artifacts in the museum is a 1910-era Staff Sergeant uniform.
Exactly of the type that were worn by our 25th Battery, which was the first battery formed in Lethbridge in 1908. And this is an actual uniform from that era.
Miller says many artifacts might have some historical value to them, but when they sit in a display case without any information, they're just an object.
So we need to bring that artifact to life by interviewing the family. What were their stories? What did that person tell their family about it? and what we can also research by it as well, how it's used, where it's used, that type of thing.
The Lethbridge Military Museum is open every Wednesday from noon until 4 p.m., and admission is by donation. You can also book an appointment to view the museum at a different time by calling 403-929-4265. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A Lethbridge man has been charged following a bicycle vehicle collision on August the 5th. Police say they received a call after the driver of a vehicle was slashed in the face with a knife by a cyclist after they collided on 2A Avenue North by 13th Street. The 28-year-old driver from Coaldale was then taken to hospital with a significant facial laceration. Following the altercation, the cyclist fled the scene but was arrested a short time later on Stafford Drive. 46-year-old Peter Ajang was charged with aggravated assault and possession of an offensive weapon. Kim Seaver has announced he's running as an independent for the upcoming federal election in Lethbridge. Now, he's lived in our city for 23 years and went to Lethbridge College to obtain his multimedia production diploma. He says he served on various boards and committees within the city. Seaver says he's campaigning on the promise of solidarity for workers, the marginalized, and the environment. Seaver says he wanted to run for the NDP, but they turned him down.
In their vetting process, found that I was too prolific and too provocative. And so they said that it wasn't going to work for Lethbridge. But I still felt that it was important that I could run, that I had something to contribute, that I believed that my politics aligned with a lot of voters in Lethbridge. Workers produce the goods and services that circulate within the economy. And so as a result, they generate the wealth that companies bring in. And then with marginalized, I just believe that everybody should be treated equally, regardless of their gender, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity, their economic background, their ability, their religion, whatever it happens to be. And then the environment, especially in Lethbridge, the environment plays such a critical role to our society, both recreationally and culturally and economically too.
Seaver needs 100 signatures to be able to officially file his nomination papers, and he says so far he's sitting at around 80. Filing deadline is coming up August the 30th. One of the hot button issues this federal election is also how to get the economy back on track while dealing with a ballooning debt. The parliamentary budget officer says the Trudeau Liberals have racked up over $1 billion in debt, and the books may not be balanced until the year 2070. Franco Terrazzano is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He says the Liberals are looking into new taxes to raise money, including a capital gains tax on the sale of your primary residence and even an annual house tax that homeowners would have to pay.
Yeah, the Liberals are now sniffing around your house. And if you sell your home earlier than the Liberals think you should, in a year, they're going to send the tax man after you with an anti-flipping tax. And look, in the last budget, there was a tax on foreigners who own vacant homes. Now we're seeing an anti-flipping tax on Canadians. The government has already spent $250,000 of our tax dollars studying home taxes. So what's next? I think Canadians have every right to be worried that a damaging home equity tax could be around the corner if these politicians don't rein in their spending.
Our country's federal party leaders hit the campaign trail once again today. The Conservatives, which are now leading in a few polls, have now turned their attention to protecting workers and their health.
I've heard the same thing over and over again. Canadian workers should know that we have their backs if they become seriously ill. But right now, our EI system only gives someone a maximum of 26 weeks to recover from an illness before they're expected to be back at work. That may be enough for many illnesses, but it simply isn't enough for serious illnesses like cancer. I'm sure that we have all known someone, a friend, a relative, who has battled cancer. We all know how devastating it is, how terrible the struggle can be. Only Canada's Conservatives are prepared to stand up for workers and take action to protect and enhance paid sick leave. A Conservative government will increase EI sickness benefits from 26 weeks to 52 weeks for those suffering from a serious illness.
Liberal leader Justin Trudeau was also on the campaign trail, going on the offensive and attacking Tory leader Erin O'Toole.
Erin O'Toole would rip up our $10 a day childcare agreements. He would slow down climate action for the economy because he doesn't understand that they go hand in hand. He would choose landlords over renters. He'd choose more options in healthcare for the wealthy and fewer for everyone else. The one thing he won't choose, vaccines. He can't even tell his own candidates to get their shots.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, meanwhile, discussed his vision for a universal pharmacare plan.
Many people can't afford the medication they need to get well. And many people who have coverage or are purchasing that medication they need are spending a lot of money, and it costs them and their families a lot. We know it doesn't have to be this way. We know that we can actually work together to solve this problem. And what we've seen the Liberals do and the Conservatives do, instead of actually delivering on this essential expansion of our healthcare system, they've been working against it. Justin Trudeau teamed up with Erin O'Toole to vote against healthcare.
When it comes to the Alberta economy, some areas have rebounded much faster than others as we slowly make our way out of the pandemic. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf says the economy in southwestern Alberta is actually thriving right now and businesses are hiring.
Lethbridge is one of the 2 jurisdictions within all of Alberta leading the charge for economic development and growth. Our unemployment numbers are the lowest in the entire province. We're on the verge of leading all of Canada. We've got new economic development, we've got private investment, and everywhere I go, the new concern is, where do I get workers to field and put into my staff so I can continue to meet the demand that my business is seeing?
MLA Nathan Neudorf will also discuss if Premier Jason Kenney is talking about potentially locking the province down as COVID-19 numbers continue to increase in Alberta. That Q&A is coming up after business news. Alberta Health Services says with the rise of COVID-19 cases in the province, some non-urgent surgeries are being postponed. Officials say additional hospital capacity is needed. AHS says they will continue to maintain emergent, urgent procedures and prioritized cancer surgeries. There are currently 9,066 active cases of COVID-19 in Alberta, including 2,112 in the Calgary zone. There are 2,133 in the Edmonton zone. Here in the South Zone, there are 1,055. The city of Lethbridge has 160 active cases, and in Medicine Hat, they have 524. A new National Truth and Reconciliation statutory holiday was announced for September. The Alberta Union of Provincial Employees alleges that some employers are choosing to not acknowledge it. According to AUPE, Alberta Health Services, Covenant Health, and the Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Commission plan to either to not give staff the time off for the holiday or not pay them time and a half. Vice President with the AUPE, Bobby Jo Borody, says they aren't happy with the decision.
In the cases where we have collective agreements that currently include wording around honoring federal statutory holidays, we have in fact filed policy grievances against those employers, especially the ones obviously who have come out and said that they will not be granting that as a stat holiday to their employees.
All 3 employers are still currently reviewing their terms and collective bargaining agreements before they proceed. The City of Calgary is working with the Indigenous community to create a permanent memorial for victims of residential schools. It will replace a temporary memorial on the steps of City Hall that was vandalized.
It is very concerning for us. With the recent vandalism at the memorial, it was triggering and reminded us of the underlying racism that Indigenous peoples still experience. This memorial site needs to be protected and dedicated to the residential school children that didn't come home. We're still here. Our people are still here. You know, across Canada, everywhere, we are still here. We're not going anywhere.
An annual festival is back here in southern Alberta this weekend. Tabor Cornfest kicked off on Thursday and runs until Saturday, offering all well-known festivities and, of course, the famous Tabor corn on the cob. As Carson Marsuk explains, the community is excited to once again be able to celebrate.
Hundreds of people made their way to Tabor this weekend to take in the festivities and try the sweet taste of corn. Cornfest is known to be the largest family-friendly festival in Western Canada and sees people from all across the country, including Michael REIMER.
Flights were cheap, so I'm like, I'm gonna come down for Cornfest. Ontario was boring, so came down to Alberta for Cornfest.
REIMER grew up in Tabor but moved to Ontario a few years ago. He says he's missed coming to Cornfest ever since he's moved.
Cornfest is awesome. I think everyone should come down. It's a blast. Good corn too. Beer gardens, the ride's fun.
To kick off the weekend, the parade on Thursday saw a record number of people come out to celebrate. Co-chair Rick Papadenitz says he's excited to see what the weekend has in store.
There's just so many people, and the whole town was buzzing yesterday with the parade, and then it just flowed over here to our food trucks and the Midway.
Aside from the live entertainment, food trucks, market, beer gardens, and Midway, 3 new events are making their Cornfest debut. A Jeep Club car show, Pure Power Wrestling, and a space to learn about Indigenous culture. For those who may not feel comfortable coming to Cornfest in person this year, you can view a live stream on the Taber Chamber of Commerce Facebook page. For those who want to take in the festivities, Papa Dennett says there is something for everyone.
Friday night we got some really great bands coming on stage. Dirt bikers are setting up right now for the big dirt bike jumps, and yeah, we got a climbing wall for the kids and bouncy castles.
If you're looking to attend the festival, Papa Dennett's only has one message.
This is the sweetest event in southern Alberta, like our corn.
Cornfest wraps up on Saturday night with a fireworks display. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
There's a hidden gem in Taber, a trout pond that is located just outside of the town, boasting many activities from hiking to camping and, of course, fishing. BCN's Naveen Day has those details.
What was previously an unkempt and overgrown fishing pond has been updated into a multi-use recreation site. Taber's trout pond has been upgraded to feature many new amenities. Taber Mayor Andrew Prokop shares with us how the project has evolved.
Basically, it was 6 years ago when we first started this particular project, and that includes the now stocked trout pond that you see before you, and the dock in the picture as well, the beach that we're standing on, and roughly 4 different stockings have taken place since the opening in 2018, and approximately 12,000 fish have been stocked in this particular pond.
Phase 3 of the 5-phase development plan was recently completed, which saw extensive expansion of the Taber Trail system, giving enthusiasts a total of 15 kilometers of trail altogether. This is thanks to local group Taber Trail 77, who provide maintenance, signing, and building of the trails.
There's a group of us that wanted to take the trail network a bit further. We presented to the town and the MD of Taber, asking them for, or allowing us to come onto their land to build and maintain the single track trails in the area. Our main focus is creating multi-use trails for hikers, bikers, runners, walkers, people that just want to go out and explore.
Approximately $10,000 was financed through the town and MD councils, and the rest has been from volunteer donations or support from local businesses. The total amount spent to date for the Trout Pond area, including the highway intersection, is approximately $2 million. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Whoop Up Days is set to kick off next Thursday. The Lethbridge and District Exhibition has released some updated safety precautions ahead of the event. Now, the new measures include mandatory temperature screening upon entrance. If you have a temperature higher than 38 degrees Celsius, you'll be asked to sit in a chill zone for a few minutes before getting rechecked. If you're still above 38 degrees, you'll be asked to leave the event. AHS will also be offering its vaccination clinic throughout the weekend. Exhibition Park is reminding people to stay home if they are sick. Masks are highly recommended. Practice physical distancing and wash your hands regularly. Staff will also be cleaning and sanitizing throughout Whoop Up Days. Around 14,000 firefighters face rising heat and a drop in humidity as they battle more than a dozen wildfires across California. That includes the Caldor Fire, a growing blaze that was slowly pushing toward the Lake Tahoe resort region. Fire officials say more than 117,000 acres have burned so far. The fire has destroyed more than 600 structures, including 455 homes since it began on August the 14th. They could definitely use some more rain in California. We had some light showers off and on in our region today, but the rain clouds will be clearing. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. After seeing a little more rain the past couple of days, things appear to be clearing up somewhat. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, so far a pretty nice looking weekend is shaping up.
Yeah, but I think we still could be in for some rain late this evening, and then it looks like we're in the clear for the rest of the weekend anyways. This evening, looking at a 30% chance of showers after midnight, winds around 20 to 40 kilometer per hour. Risk of a thunderstorm as well this evening. Those skies clearing late Saturday morning. That wind still kicking around, though, the 20 to 40K winds for Saturday. High of 22 degrees, though, with a mix of sun and cloud. Beautiful sunny day on Sunday. Look at that temperature. We're looking at 28 degrees as a high, 25 on Monday under sunny skies as well. 60% chance of rain on Tuesday, looking at periods of rain continuing into Tuesday night as well. High of only 19 that day. And then we're down to 18 degrees for both Wednesday and next Thursday under partly cloudy skies. So yeah, our weather a little bit all over the place. Sometimes we're higher, sometimes we're lower than that average for this time of year, which is 24. Average low 9 degrees. 36 was our high temperature on this day back in 1996, and in 1942 we had our chilliest, which was 3. 6:40 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening at 8:26 p.m. So we're about 2 minutes shorter of daylight than we were yesterday. It's happening fast, definitely. Over on the West Coast, Victoria's high tomorrow, 20 degrees, 21 in Vancouver. Beautiful sunny skies in Edmonton tomorrow with a high of 24 degrees. Calgary starting out sunny, but then a mix of sun and cloud as those clouds roll in later on in the day. High of 20 degrees tomorrow in Calgary. It's going to be a little bit rainy on the rest of the prairie. Saskatoon seeing some showers with a risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow. High of 19 degrees, 18 the high in Regina. Same thing, showers, risk of thunderstorms, and Winnipeg looking at wind gusts of 30 to 50 kilometers per hour with showers and risk of a thunderstorm again. Also rainy in the middle part of the country. Toronto's high though, 30 degrees. Still under a heat warning though. 24 the high in Ottawa, chance of showers also tomorrow in Montreal with a high of 25 degrees. Looking at Fredericton's weather, it's beautiful sunshine, 24, 23 the high in Halifax under sunny skies. This is where the sunshine is at tomorrow over on the East Coast. 20 degrees the high in Charlottetown and 16 the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with a chance of showers there. Some wind gusts up to 30 to 50 k per hour. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you, rain or shine, by the Gym in the North. Top-notch equipment and customized classes in Lethbridge's North End.
Apple has agreed to loosen App Store payment rules as part of a settlement of a lawsuit filed on behalf of iPhone app developers in the United States. It will allow developers of iPhone apps to email their users on how to pay for services outside of the app. That would circumvent Apple commissions of 15 to 30%. Previously, notifications such as those were not allowed. The concession now opens one way for app developers to encourage its users to pay in new ways as long as the companies obtain consumer consent. CIBC's chief executive is defending our country's banking sector after Liberal leader Justin Trudeau made a pledge to raise the tax rate for the industry. Victor Dodig says banks have always been in the crosshairs, but a healthy banking system helps the Canadian economy to grow. He says banks distributed COVID-19 stimulus funds and deferred on loans in the early days of the pandemic. Trudeau has proposed hiking the corporate income tax rate by 3 percentage points for banks and insurance companies earning more than $1 billion. He says they came into a windfall of profits thanks to economic stimulus measures from Ottawa. TD Bank Group shares closed down more than 2% as the company reported a third quarter profit of $3.55 billion. That is up from $2.25 billion in the same quarter last year. The company reported a recovery of credit losses of $37 million in its latest quarter. That compares with a provision of credit losses of $2.19 billion from a year ago. The bank shares closed down $2.05 or 2.39% at $83.70 on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 140 points in the day to finish at 20,645. The Dow was up 242 points to 35,456. The S&P 500 was up 39 points to 4509, and the Nasdaq was up 183 points to 15,130. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.32 to $68.74 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 19 cents to $4.37 US. Gold was up 25.14 to $18.1758 US an ounce, and silver was up 46 cents to $24.03 US an ounce. Wheat is at $415 per metric ton, barley's at $413, canola's at $9.08, and corn is at $440 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.28 to $122. Feeder cattle were up 20 cents to $164.65, and lean hogs were up $2.83 to $90.73. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $79.25 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, there are reports that $28 million has been raised to help rescue Afghan Christians in Afghanistan. According to American National Radio host Glenn Beck, the Nazarene Fund has been quite busy loading Afghan refugees this week. Beck says thanks to the donations, 20 757s are lined up and ready to go. He says by the end of the day today, they're hoping to move 7,000 Christians out of the war-torn country. COVID-19 numbers have been slowly increasing here in Alberta. Would Premier Kenney consider another lockdown? Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf shares his thoughts in just a moment. What a busy time it is in the political world. We have the federal election coming up September 20th and the municipal election on October 18th. Now, there'll be a couple of questions on the ballot in October. One is to do with daylight savings and the other is with equalization payments. To discuss this in more detail is Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf. Nathan, let's first off start talking about daylight savings. We live here in farm country in southwestern Alberta. What are farmers and ranchers telling you, yay or nay, when it comes to daylight savings?
That's a great question, Hal. Great to be here. I think they're still thinking about it. And to be honest, I think a lot of them are more concerned about what's going on in their fields than what's going on with the sunshine right now, other than the heat. But they are looking forward to, I hope, putting their opinions on paper at the municipal election in terms of referendum to see what we can do what's best for them and what's best for their business. There's pros and cons each way, but we want to make sure that we are aligning ourselves with our key business partners, both to the east and west, as well as to the south.
Yeah, we'll talk about what the farmers have been dealing with and a lot of the ranchers when it comes to the drought in just a few moments here, how the province is potentially helping. Now, Premier Kenney has been quite vocal on Alberta getting a raw deal when it comes to equalization payments, saying we've been paying out billions upon billions more than we're actually getting back. How important is this referendum on equalization?
I think it's incredibly important. Now, many people will realize that it won't be the final answer. It's not the trump card that will make Ottawa listen to our demands are, but it will hopefully start the real conversation about adjusting equalization. That's what it's intended to do. It doesn't fix all of our concerns, but it definitely starts a conversation to negotiate in good faith between Alberta and the government in Ottawa to make sure that we can adjust that equalization contract for when times are poor in Alberta, like we've been through in the past few years.
So let's say if Erin O'Toole and the federal Tories get in, next month, this would probably bode a lot better for the UCP and talking about the equalization payments, correct?
Well, I would hope so. I would hope that like-minded governments and philosophies would at least be open to the conversation. The Premier's done an incredible amount of work with his provincial counterparts, and at one point in time having unanimous agreement to look at that calculation to make sure it's more equitable for all provinces right across Canada. So I would really hope that whoever takes the seat after the federal election would be willing to talk with the provinces about how we can do that better.
Now, Premier Jason Kenney is taking a lot of flack over loosening COVID-19 restrictions, especially since the number of cases have been on the rise here in Alberta. The NDP says this is very dangerous, loosening the restrictions, and a faulty decision. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would just ask everybody to look at the science. What we've really seen, particularly with vaccinations, is that the new case counts and the new numbers are vastly within the population who's unvaccinated. So we understand that, and people do have a choice. But once these case numbers have gone through the unvaccinated, where do they go? In fact, we've had a doctor from Edmonton share just today that in the ICU in Edmonton hospitals, not a single case there with COVID is with a person with any sort of vaccination. So we would encourage those to be vaccinated. And again, what the numbers we're really watching are how many are actually going to hospital? How many are actually going to ICU? Case numbers sometimes can be a flashy, scary number in the media to catch people's attention, but that's not the whole story. And we just want to make sure that people are really following the science as we allow the economy to get back on its feet.
Now, many business owners are quite concerned Alberta may go into another potential lockdown as COVID-19 numbers continue to rise. Will that actually happen? Because many business owners, Nathan, I've spoken with, said we cannot afford another lockdown. We're going to go under.
And we absolutely understand that, which is why we've taken the path that we have to try to open the economy as safely and carefully as possible. Some people think it's too fast, but I think we've been very cautious with that and pausing our loosening of restrictions earlier or a few weeks ago. But if you watch the signs around the world with this fourth wave, as it's being called, in the UK, we also saw a rapid rise of case numbers, but then an equally rapid decline as it finished going through the unvaccinated population. It didn't have anywhere else to go. So I'm very hopeful that we will see the same kind of trend, maybe a bit of a accelerated case rate, but then a very quick decline as well, allowing us to safely keep businesses open so we don't have to add further restrictions. We will keep what we've got in place right now, allow the opening of school to see what happens there, but we will continue to watch those numbers and monitor safely, but we want to keep the economy going as best we can as well.
Now, speaking of the economy, how is the Lethbridge economy doing now since the restrictions were lifted?
It's been incredible. I've been out visiting businesses for the past few weeks, and we are going full steam. I am happy to report, it's my understanding anyways, that Lethbridge is one of the 2 jurisdictions within all of Alberta leading the charge for economic development and growth. Our unemployment numbers are the lowest in the entire province. We're on the verge of leading all of Canada. We've got new economic development, we've got private investment, and everywhere I go, the new concern is, where do I get workers to field and put into my staff so I can continue to meet the demand that my business is seeing?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, are any local businesses still having trouble finding workers right now? And if so, is that specific to certain types of businesses, or is it right across the board?
From what I can tell, Hal, it is right across the board. It's every sector from restaurants and hospitality, which is great to see as they've been some of the most heavily impacted from the restrictions previously. But I've talked to construction owners, manufacturers, farmers, school bus drivers. They need school bus drivers. So it is really right across the board. Basically, if you're looking for work and want to do something, we can find a job for you. And hopefully that message will start permeating. We'll see people flooding back to the workplace.
Now let's talk about this terrible drought that we've been experiencing here in Alberta, many parts of the country as well, a very hot and dry summer. What kind of help has the province been offering to a lot of our farmers and producers? Because it's been such a nasty summer when it comes to a drought and the lack of water.
Yeah, it's been lovely to enjoy. It's nice to go out in the backyard and get a suntan and that kind of thing, but it has been hard on a lot of farmers and crops and those with livestock. So our government's taken a very active approach initially and at the beginning of the summer to increase farmers and ranchers' access to water within their water rights so that they can keep their livestock cool and hydrated. A very, very important part. And we've also, through the Agri Recovery Program, provincially, we put $136 million, and the federal government has added $204 million to allow farmers and ranchers to purchase feedstock for their animals. So hopefully that'll help. Hopefully that'll get us through. I mean, we've had the added benefit down here in the south of having many acres under irrigation, which has given them a very positive crop this year. But there are some that have had to literally till it under because of the dryness.
Nathan, how is the province doing when it comes to red tape reduction, kind of speeding things up for business owners? I understand you were working on trimming some of the inspection and permit processes?
Yeah, that's right. Overall, we've accomplished about 17% of the 33% reduction that we're going for. So we're right on track with that and having cut huge numbers of red tape, but we've still got more to go. And one of the areas, as you've mentioned, inspections and permitting, we're looking at that. We want to make sure that the process for our construction industry or our manufacturing industry, their permits and their procedures are the same. Doesn't matter where they do business. They may do business in Calgary and Edmonton, but maybe they come here to Lethbridge or go to Red Deer or Grand Prairie. We want it to be consistent and stable. That allows them to run their businesses efficiently. But if it's a different set of rules or a different set of interpretations everywhere they go, that really costs and adds to their business and doesn't provide a great product to the consumer at the end because they're not sure of the standard they're getting. So some of those areas we're really looking at because it will lower the cost to the consumer and make it more consistent no matter where you are in the province.
Many people here in southern Alberta, Nathan, agree that Highway 3 can be a very treacherous highway and dangerous with so many accidents. What are things looking like for twinning Highway 3 here in the province?
Well, it's in the engineering and design phase, so we're really excited about that. And I believe they're just acquiring the last few pieces of land. Then the next step in that design is to make sure they've done their environmental scans wherever they touch a waterway, whether that's a creek or a ditch or something like that, to make sure we're protecting wildlife. And once they get that completed, likely will be sometime this winter. But I really look forward to next year when they can break ground and you start seeing those lanes being twinned in between the passing sections that are there now. I think it'll really add to safety, and I think a lot of people are very excited to see that highway actually being built next year.
Now, you were elected to become the UCP caucus chair. I know that's probably not an easy task for you, especially with all of the heated internal debate between UCP MLAs, which got a few of them even turfed from the party. What is your plan to convince everyone to simply get along?
Well, besides my smile and winning personality, what we like to do is we create an environment for listening, and we want to do that respectfully and confidentially. I would just ask your viewers and people watching to understand that when you enter a conversation or a debate with an open mind, the place where you end up might not be the place where you begin. So to allow for that change of opinion, change of position, to be done fairly and without coercion, you do need that confidence. You need that understanding that I can make a point and maybe I'm off base with that point, but I can learn and grow. And that's what we're really trying to do, is create that dynamic where people can share their starting points safely and allow for that discourse to take place where we can educate one another, we can listen to others' arguments, and we can be convinced of a better path if there is one forward, or we can convince others of the path that we see. And that's what I'm really trying to do.
Are MLAs still being allowed to speak their minds freely, or is it more about towing the party line?
Oh no, we want our MLAs to speak freely. We want them to share their ideas. That's how we grow. But it is about doing that in confidence. It's much more difficult if you share that publicly and then find out some further information, and then it's very hard to retreat. So it's not about towing the party line. What it is about is confidence, learning and debating behind closed doors, and then coming together in consensus when we open those doors, so we can show Albertans that we have fought this through and we have decided to move through unified and together. And we might have different viewpoints or different degrees of understanding on that, but we want to go through those conversations properly and to represent our constituents the best we can.
Now, the province recently announced the $6.9 million Lethbridge broadband fiber project. What will this really mean for our community?
Well, it's going to be predominantly put into infrastructure that's going to help the Sharing and Churchill industrial parks here on the north end of Lethbridge. But it's going to allow a lot of businesses and possibly even some families and students to connect to the internet. And as we've seen over the past couple of years, that internet connection is vital when you go through a pandemic, because it's really hard to go as many places as you want. Now, hopefully we don't have to return to that, but businesses, again, we are part of a very global economy, particularly with our agricultural sector. And we need our businesses to be able to link up and connect with their clients and customers and trading partners around the world whenever, wherever they can, and without delays. So I think this will be a great benefit to the city of Lethbridge.
Now, Lethbridge City Councillor Rob Miyashiro announced recently that he'll be seeking the nomination to represent the NDP in your riding in Lethbridge East in the next provincial election. What are your thoughts with that? Rob's a little competition here?
That's true. I think it's great. I think it's part of democracy, and I think the individuals and citizens of Lethbridge deserve to have choice. So I wish him well. He's in the nomination process. We don't know who else may throw their hat into that ring. And they will have their process to go through that. And then at the next election, I expect a full slate of competition to challenge me for this seat, of which it's a great honor to hold and represent. And I'll do my best to continue to earn that right from the citizens of Lethbridge East.
Now, speaking of election, let's talk about the upcoming federal election on September 20th. Any thoughts on what kind of outcome would improve the economic situation for Lethbridge and Alberta?
Of course. Obviously, there's a party that holds the same colors as mine, and the color blue, and we all know what that means. But I think more how I think about it is I'd really love to see the representative from Lethbridge, and maybe several counterparts from Alberta sitting at a cabinet table in Ottawa. I think that would best represent our ideas, our vision, our hopes, our economy. And that's what I really want to see for Alberta and for Lethbridge as a result of the upcoming election. Rather than trying to forecast the outcome of that, I think, like everyone else, I want my voice to be heard. I want my rights to be protected. And I want my prospects and future for myself, for your family, for my family, for the kids in the next generation to have the best success going forward. And that's what I really think I want to see out of this election, out of the democratic process, is a voice at the table.
Nathan Newdorf is the MLA for Lethbridge East. Thanks so much for your time today, Nathan.
You bet. Thank you, Hal. Pleasure to be here.
Well, as we grow older and retirement age begins to approach, most of us turn our thoughts to how much money will I need to live out the rest of my life. But are there far more important issues to consider when it comes to retirement? Well, joining us today is Alex Lippert, one of the co-founders of Steadfast Wealth, a company which has assets under advisement of nearly $1 billion. He is also the co-author of the book After Work, an honest discussion about the retirement lie and how to live a future worthy of dreams. He's joining us from Colorado Springs. Welcome to Bridge City News, Alex. So great to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, like, what an interesting title for a book. Can you maybe tell, first of all, you don't look anywhere close to retirement age yourself, but so how did you come to write this book? You're obviously a financial planner. You work with people close to retirement, right?
Yeah, so being a financial planner now for almost 11 years, it's really led to so many just direct observations and a lot of insights into folks' kind of psychological side as they approach and, get into retirement, and kind of what happens beyond the financial side. The financial piece of the equation is really important. Obviously, that's my career. But time after time, there were so many folks who, they have all of the financial side covered completely. They don't have any problems, living out their lives, doing whatever they want to do from a financial standpoint. But a lot of them end up unhappy and find themselves lost in retirement. And that's a curiosity that I wanted to explore with the book. And so that's kind of the genesis of the book.
Sounds like it. So in the book, you mentioned the retirement lie. So can you tell us what the retirement lie is? What does our cultural mindset get wrong about retirement?
Yeah, the retirement lie is that a withdrawn, kind of self-centered one is a good one. So there's this narrative that permeates our society that says, hey, you've put in time, you've put in effort, you've raised children, you've poured into other people's lives, you've poured into the company that you've worked for, your entire career. Now it's time for you. Now it's time to sail off into the sunset and vacation and play golf and all these different things that are fun that I think do have a place in your life. But I think, that cannot be the entree. That can only be the garnish. The fun stuff can be the garnish, but you really need to focus on purpose and fulfillment and, finding work after work, even if it's not quote unquote work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned right off the top, it's psychological too. Now, you regularly advise people about financial planning for retirement. Obviously, that's what you do. And you've heard of a lot of personal stories, I'm sure, as you've come to know your clients over the years. But once people retire and have a lot of free time on their hands, do they often lose their sense of purpose, perhaps part of their identity?
Yes, they absolutely do. And I think it takes a lot of intentional thought before stepping away from work or before becoming an empty nester. Some of these milestone moments where you've been busy, and even if you haven't necessarily been fulfilled, you're almost tricked into thinking you're fulfilled just because there's so much on your plate in any one given time. But as soon as you step out of that kind of life madness, if you will, and into that time where you do have all of this extra time, if you're not intentional about, where am I going and what's my next purpose center, like where am I going to feel that, like I did a lot of good work today, regardless of what that work is, where is that going to come from?
Yeah, there comes that sense of purpose and meaning, and back to the lie. So how do people get out of that lie, so to speak?
Yeah, well, the first step I think is just to examine the word retire and retirement. I mean, you come up with a lot of interesting synonyms, retreat, withdraw. I mean, all of these words that sound terrible, right? So don't think about retirement as retirement. Think about retirement as a graduation. I mean, when we have a college student graduating, think about how many horizons are open to them. Like the world is waiting for them to go get it. And I think you need to think through that same lens. I mean, this is a graduation from one season, which could have been a fantastic career, raising children, all of these great things. But this next season of your life can be the most impactful of your life because you have the most financial resources, presumably. You absolutely have the most time of your life, and you have the most experience and wisdom. And so all of these things culminate into this like beautiful combination of you have so much potential. So go out and live it, and your life is going to be transformed, but you're also going to transform the community, your family members, everybody around you at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned synonyms earlier, because when I was researching for this interview, I actually did a synonym search on the word retirement, and you're right. Words like loneliness and isolation came up. Like, there were some really negative things that I would never have even thought of. And I'm like, that's not what retirement means to me. But I think you're right. I think people do find themselves in that. So what is the key to to pursue that purposeful retirement? What's the key to that?
Yeah, so in the book After Work, we walk through 10 different keys, and they're all very different. So awe, having a sense of awe is one. Purpose is obviously kind of the gravity that everything revolves around. But I think sometimes it's helpful to have a deathbed conversation with yourself now. So fast forward your life, think that you've lived, this long, happy life, quote unquote happy, right? And you look back and, what would you regret spending more time doing? And what would you regret really hoping that you had spent more time doing? So would you look back and say, man, I wish I would have spent, time playing more pickleball or having more happy hour with friends? Or would you say, I wish I would have spent more time with my grandchildren, teaching them how to fish, or painting, with my children, or whatever it is, or starting a nonprofit and volunteering more and making an impact in somebody else's life. There's so many different things that you can do in this approach, and I think that it's very unique to any one given person. So it's hard to say, hey, here's the roadmap. Do X, Y, Z, and you'll feel fulfilled and you'll feel like you're full of purpose, right? But I think if you have that kind of that deathbed conversation with yourself, that really brings into context, what is a fun thing that's fun, but it's not lasting, it's not meaningful in your life, and what is truly meaningful, and then home in on those meaningful aspects of your life and just go get them and just get re-engaged in those however you can.
Mm-hmm. That actually sounds like great advice for anybody to have that conversation, so that you can have more of a purpose-driven life, so to speak. Wonderful. There's a lot of wisdom in that, I think. Now, you write about time and structure, of course. So retired people suddenly have more time on their hands, but might be lacking that structure of routine that they once had when they were working, right? So how can they plan and manage their calendar properly?
Yeah, so calendar is an interesting chapter in the book. It's probably the shortest chapter. It's fairly straightforward, but I think a calendar is an interesting tool to use, and not just to fill it with busy stuff, right? Because that defeats the purpose. But I think having a calendar helps you achieve minor goals in any one given day towards some greater goal or undertaking. And so I think having not having a calendar and waking up and just winging it in retirement, saying, hey, it's Wednesday, I slept in, I'm enjoying my coffee, and the next month, my entire calendar is just blank. Like that leads to a lot of indecisiveness and inaction, I think. And so I think as you begin to look at retirement, and even just now, as you start to build a calendar, really try to just implement these fulfilling aspects of life. Like we've got a client who seems like he's always fulfilled. He's a fantastic guy. And he writes, hey, I've got this goal of reading a book every 2 weeks, and I'm reading about all of the presidents, and I'm like doing all of these different interesting things that he's genuinely interested in. And so he actually carves out 2 hours in the morning to read, and so it doesn't have to be this huge goal, start a company and do XYZ and do all of these massive things. It can just be really, really small things. But I think, any audacious kind of big life goal and thing that's going to be really fulfilling is going to be challenging, and it's going to take time and effort. And it's always a culmination of really, really small actions from now until, you've reached your objective. And so I think utilizing the calendar in that way to basically goal set on a really small scale can help you ultimately reach where you want to go.
I would imagine there's sometimes mental health issues can set in retirement. People might find themselves a bit depressed. Do you find that sometimes?
Yeah, the statistics are shocking, actually. I mean, when you look at some of the stats about just retirees, like the divorce rate has tripled for age 65 plus since 1990. This large insurance study done by Cigna found that loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And a lot of retirees are very lonely because, for one reason or the other, but I think ultimately connection to others is part of our human fabric. And I think that you really need to lean in, however that looks in your own life, and really lean in and stay connected. And there's another study that we mentioned in the book that's about, purposeful connections with others. And it's not about how many connections you have. It's not about being this social butterfly out there with a lot of superficial, relationships, a lot of acquaintances. It's about the depth of your relationships. And so even if there's one person in your life that you have a deep relationship with, how can you make that deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what advice do you have for viewers to avoid that loneliness gap? I mean, you talk a bit about the importance of connecting with others through serving, of course.
Yeah, I think, generosity is one chapter in the book where we dig into not only financial generosity, but also, donating your time towards a worthy cause. But I think, there's a lot of noise in our lives. And I think the first step really is to try to turn the volume down on all of that noise. I mean, we all have a smartphone in our pocket with, instant news, instant everything about the markets, about your finances, about, this or that. And I think you really need to tone down a lot of the distractions, a lot of the things that we feel like we can control, but we have no control over. And so I think the control, notion in retirement is really interesting, because if you start to take away the things that take up a lot of your mind space that you're trying to control, but you simply can't, then you have a lot more energy to spend on the things that are really important in your life that you can control. Like you can control your health to a certain degree. Like you can choose to live a healthy lifestyle. You can control how much time you dedicate to your friends and family. You can't control what happens in the investment markets, or with, taxes or what have you. And so I think focusing on the right things and just trying to turn down the volume on the things that you can't control helps a lot in that regard.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned health and how you can control that, because your book includes a chapter on some very important, practical, but important things. And you're mentioning that movement and exercise, of course, is one of them. So tell us a bit about why this is pretty important. I mean, we all know it's important to exercise, but I think it's probably good for the mind too.
Yeah, it is. And we chose not to title the chapter Exercise, because that comes with a certain connotation, right? So we chose movement. And I think the basis there is that, for a healthy body and mind, we just need to be active. I mean, I know some folks who are 90 years old who are out there, walking multiple miles a day, and they've got, bad knees, what have you, but they're out there doing it. And when you have a conversation with them, you're like, wow, I feel like I'm just talking with a peer of mine. not somebody who's lived, more than double my lifetime. But then I also meet folks who are, say, 60, who kind of come off as that classic grandma or grandpa type, who are, unhealthy, having just trouble doing normal everyday things. And I'm like, well, what is the delta there? What's the difference between those two? And I think a big part of it is just movement, having an active lifestyle, going out and doing what you can do. And I think it's really important to remember that it's not about anybody else, with this. I mean, it's not about comparing yourself to the Joneses or anything. It's really just about improving you, right? So being the best you can be. So it's not about comparing yourself to anybody else. It's about, hey, if I walked a mile yesterday and I felt okay, how about a mile and 5 steps more? And then eventually you're going to reach this point where, the stairs aren't a problem anymore and you can carry your own luggage or what have you. I mean, I think it's all about improving when you can and where you can as much as possible.
Absolutely. Sounds like your book has all kinds of nuggets of wisdom for sure. Thanks so much for being with us today, Alex. Alex Lippert is the co-author of the book After Work, available at theafterwork.net.
Thanks so much.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.